The movie begins inside a Florida state prison back in 2003, where a man named Fitzroy visits an inmate with a very particular offer. He tells the prisoner that because of his violent past, including the fact that he once killed someone, he has exactly the kind of profile the CIA is looking for. Fitzroy explains that there is a covert program called Sierra, and if the prisoner agrees to join it, his sentence can be erased. With no real future waiting for him behind bars, the man accepts the deal. 18 years pass, and the story moves to Bangkok. That same prisoner is now operating under the codename Sierra 6. During an undercover mission, a CIA agent named Miranda casually hands him a toy gun. 6 uses it as part of his cover to get inside a restricted area, and once he reaches the right room, he secretly swaps the fake weapon for a real one. All the while, he stays connected to the CIA team through his earpiece. At the command center, Carmichael, the man currently running the operation, gives 6 his orders. The target is described as a major threat to national security, and 6 is expected to eliminate him without hesitation. Moments later, the target arrives at the location and heads into a room positioned 2 floors above 6. 6 gets into position, lines up the shot, and prepares to finish the assignment. But just as he is about to pull the trigger, a young child suddenly walks near the target. 6 immediately freezes. Carmichael keeps pressuring him through the comms, ordering him to take the shot anyway, but 6 refuses to risk hitting the child. His hesitation blows the operation wide open, and within seconds, the target's security team realizes something is wrong. A gunfight erupts. 6 is forced to abandon the clean kill and instead fights his way through the target's guards. Miranda also jumps into the chaos and helps him take down several of the armed men. However, the target manages to escape by diving through a window, and 6 instantly goes after him. The chase carries them into the middle of a huge fireworks celebration, where explosions of color and smoke fill the night around them. When 6 finally catches up to the man, the target makes a shocking claim. He says he is actually Sierra 4, another member of the same secret program. 6 does not believe him at first, and the 2 men fight violently in the middle of the display. Their brutal struggle ends when 6 manages to stab 4. As 4 lies dying, 6 questions him and tries to understand what is really going on. 4 insists that Carmichael is dirty and that the mission was never what 6 was told. Before dying, he gives 6 a necklace and warns him that the people running things cannot be trusted. Miranda arrives shortly after, and 6 explains what 4 told him. Miranda then reveals that the target had somehow gained access to classified information related to the Sierra program. Meanwhile, Carmichael's men search 4's body, clearly looking for something important, but they do not find it. Not long after, Carmichael contacts 6 and asks directly about the item 4 gave him. 6 says nothing useful, ignores the pressure, and ends the call. He then slips into a gaming event, where the crowd and noise give him cover. There, he opens the necklace and removes a hidden memory stick from inside it. When he checks the contents, it becomes clear that 4 was carrying something extremely dangerous. After leaving the event, 6 calls Fitzroy, who has since retired from the agency. 6 tells him that Carmichael may be corrupt and asks whether Sierra 4 had a scar on the right side of his chin. Fitzroy confirms that he did. 6 then explains that the agency used him to kill 4, and before dying, 4 handed him an encrypted drive. Fitzroy understands the seriousness of the situation and tells 6 he will contact a few people he still trusts inside the CIA. He also says arrangements can be made to extract 6 from an airfield just outside Bangkok. Meanwhile, back at the CIA, Suzanne speaks with Carmichael in a restroom. Carmichael tells her that he plans to bring in Lloyd to clean up the problem. Suzanne immediately objects, warning him that Lloyd does not solve problems like a normal operative. She says his methods are unstable, reckless, and basically sociopathic. But Carmichael brushes off her concerns and decides to use him anyway. The movie then cuts to Lloyd, who is in the middle of torturing someone when Carmichael calls. Carmichael explains that Sierra 6 has information that could send both of them to prison for a very long time, so Lloyd's job is simple: find 6 and kill him. Lloyd asks about 6's connection to Fitzroy, and Carmichael tells him that their relationship is almost like father and son. Hearing this, Lloyd immediately sees an opening and suggests going after someone Fitzroy loves. The following day, 6 arrives at the airfield where Fitzroy said a team would be waiting to pick him up. At the same time, Lloyd approaches Fitzroy during a funeral. While speaking to him, Lloyd casually handles a photograph of Fitzroy's niece, making the threat painfully clear. He demands to know where Six is. Soon after, the men sent to collect Six receive a call from Fitzroy. Under pressure, Fitzroy tells them to kill Six instead, but Six notices the shift before they can catch him off guard. When they attack, he is already prepared and immediately fights back. Inside the plane, Six takes on 4 men at once in a brutal close-quarters fight. During the struggle, the aircraft is damaged and a hole is accidentally torn into the side of the plane. The pressure rips open part of the fuselage, and debris begins flying everywhere. Pieces of the wreckage smash into 2 engines, causing the aircraft to lose control and start breaking apart in midair. Six is thrown from the plane and finds himself falling through the sky. As he tumbles downward, he spots another man nearby wearing a parachute. With no other option, Six fights him while they are both free-falling. He manages to overpower the man, strangles him, and grabs hold of him just as the parachute opens. After surviving the fall, Six contacts Fitzroy and angrily confronts him about the setup. Fitzroy admits that Lloyd has taken his niece Claire. Six is furious, but he also understands that Fitzroy was forced into betraying him. Later, Lloyd tells Fitzroy that he is going to make Six so visible that every elite covert team in the world will come hunting for him. The story then jumps back 2 years earlier. Six is shown sleeping on a train when Fitzroy and a CIA center chief named Margaret approach him with a personal request. Fitzroy explains that he has been taking care of his niece Claire. Margaret has helped make sure Claire lives as normal a life as possible, but now someone has leaked Fitzroy's address. They ask the agency for protection, but for reasons no one fully understands, Carmichael refused to send security. Since Fitzroy has to leave for a mission, they need Six to stay with Claire and keep her safe. Fitzroy also explains that Claire was born with a serious heart condition. She recently had a pacemaker installed, which means she needs regular hospital visits and careful monitoring. Soon after, Six meets Claire for the first time. She comments that his name is strange, and Six casually jokes that 007 was already taken. Later, while Six searches around for his jacket, he notices that Claire is sitting on it. Claire and Six share a short but warm conversation, just enough to show that there is some trust beginning to form between them. After that, Six goes back to doing what he was brought there to do, keeping watch over the house and making sure nothing gets close to her. Later that night, while Six is monitoring the property, Claire suddenly calls out to him. Her voice sounds wrong, and before she can properly explain what is happening, she collapses. Six reacts immediately and rushes her to the hospital. At the hospital, the doctors tell him that the problem was caused by a programming error in her pacemaker. Thankfully, they say Claire is going to be okay. They also mention that the tracking system inside the pacemaker is working properly. From her hospital bed, Claire quietly signals to Six, noticing that he is still carefully watching over her from a distance. The next day, Six checks on her and asks if she is feeling any better. Claire, trying to act casual about the whole thing, simply says that it is just another Thursday. She then opens up a little and tells him that Fitzroy is basically the closest thing she has to real family. Six understands that more than she realizes, and he admits that Fitzroy means the same thing to him. But the calm does not last long. A moment later, Six notices something suspicious. The security cameras around the house are starting to go offline one by one. He immediately senses danger and tells Claire that she should head to bed. Claire goes to her room and turns on loud music, unaware that something serious is happening. As the music blasts through the house, Six moves carefully through the building, checking every corner. Suddenly, an armed man appears inside, and Six is forced into a violent fight with him. Claire hears the noise from her room and calls out, asking if Six is okay. After dealing with the attacker, Six looks down at the body on the floor. Keeping his voice calm so Claire does not panic, he replies that it is just another Thursday. Then he wishes her good night, and Claire slowly goes back into her room. Back in the present day, Six arrives in Vienna. There, he collects a bag filled with cash and weapons before going to the home of a man who appears to be a fixer. The man offers him a large amount of money, but Six is not there for that. He tells him he needs 2 things, a passport and the serial number connected to Claire Fitzroy's pacemaker. The man tells Six to clean himself up while he works on it. As Six washes off, he notices an old burn mark on his wrist. The sight of it triggers painful memories from his past, flashing back to a man telling him to hide the mark so his mother will not see it. Pulling himself back to the present, Six writes Claire's pacemaker serial number on his hand so he will not lose it. He then stands in front of a camera, expecting the man to take his passport photo. But instead of taking a picture, the man suddenly pulls a lever. A trap door opens beneath Six, and he drops into a sealed compartment below. Six quickly tries to shoot his way out, but the glass above him is bulletproof. Meanwhile, in Berlin, Carmichael questions Miranda about the Bangkok mission. He asks if she had any reason to believe Six was pursuing his own agenda instead of following orders. Miranda says no, explaining that she had only met Six for the first time during that operation. Carmichael leans on her harder, warning that if she is hiding anything, her career and life are finished. Miranda insists she knows nothing and tells him to stop crowding her. At the same time, Six begins searching the trap for anything he can use. He gathers whatever tools and materials are available, cuts loose an old pipe, and starts pulling gunpowder from bullets. Then he packs the powder into the pipe and attaches the makeshift device to his pistol. Carmichael soon receives word that Six has been captured. Just as he informs Miranda that she is being pulled from field duty, a message comes through. Miranda catches part of it reflected in Carmichael's glasses. After Carmichael leaves, Miranda exits as well and quickly takes a car. Back in the trap, Six damages another pipe, causing water to flood into the compartment. Not long after, Lloyd arrives at the fixer's place. His men smash their way inside, and Lloyd shoots the fixer dead without hesitation. As Lloyd's men swim down toward the basement area, Six plants his homemade device against the trapdoor. Then he sets it off. The blast gives him the opening he needs, and he shoots upward, escaping into the room before attacking the men around him. Six fights through them fast, taking down one man after another. Just as he subdues the last attacker, Lloyd steps in and sprays him with pepper spray. Even in the middle of the chaos, the two trade a few sharp, sarcastic remarks. Then, Six drops a grenade, forcing both of them to run in opposite directions. Wounded and exhausted, Six tries to get away, but Lloyd cuts him off again. Before Lloyd can finish the job, he is suddenly hit with a tranquilizer dart. Miranda appears unexpectedly, holding a weapon on Six. She does not treat him like an ally yet. Instead, she points her gun at him and forces him toward her car. When Six refuses to climb into the trunk, Miranda simply shoots him with a tranquilizer too. Sometime later, in Croatia, Lloyd arrives by helicopter with Fitzroy. Suzanne is furious when she sees what he has done. She tells him that he cannot just abduct CIA personnel and drag their families into the operation. Lloyd does not care. He makes it clear that he will do whatever he thinks is necessary to complete the mission. Fitzroy is then brought into a room where Claire is being held. The moment she sees him, she runs to him and hugs him tightly. Meanwhile, Six wakes up inside Miranda's car. Miranda is angry because Carmichael now suspects that she may be secretly helping Six. Six warns her that Carmichael will probably have both of them killed anyway. When Miranda asks why, Six tells her the truth. Sierra 4 gave him an encrypted drive, and he already sent it to Margaret in Prague. Hearing this, Miranda immediately drives toward Margaret's home. At the same time, Lloyd's tech specialist finds surveillance footage from Bangkok showing Six sending a package to someone in Prague. Lloyd questions Fitzroy, demanding to know who Six would contact there, but Fitzroy refuses to give him anything. That changes when Lloyd threatens to bring Claire back into the situation. Not willing to risk her safety, Fitzroy finally gives him the name. Miranda and Six arrive at Margaret's residence. Margaret has already managed to decrypt the drive, and what she found is damning. The files show that Carmichael has been using CIA resources like his own private assassination unit, authorizing illegal killings and bombings without approval and without caring who gets caught in the damage. Margaret hands Six the key to her bulletproof car, giving him a possible way out. But before they can move, the apartment is suddenly ripped apart by heavy gunfire. In the chaos, Six accidentally loses his grip on the car key and it drops to the floor. Miranda quickly spots it and picks it up before he can. A second later, a grenade comes flying through the window. The explosion tears through the apartment, and Miranda uses the confusion to escape. Margaret, meanwhile, leads Six toward a hidden way out. She shows him the secret passage, but instead of leaving with him, she chooses to remain behind and buy him time. As the mercenaries storm into the apartment, Margaret quietly turns the place into a trap. She fills the room with gas, waits for the attackers to move in, and then detonates it, blowing the men apart in a violent blast. Six manages to get out of the building, but he does not stay free for long. Police spot him almost immediately and begin chasing him through the streets. During the pursuit, Six is struck by a passing car, giving the authorities enough time to catch him. They arrest him and secure him to a bench with handcuffs. Lloyd, watching the situation escalate, gives a ruthless order to every team under his command. He tells them that anyone who gets in their way is to be shot, no exceptions. Soon, trucks filled with armed mercenaries arrive at the scene. Still chained to the bench, Six sees the danger closing in. He grabs a gun from a nearby police officer and fires into the air, causing the civilians around him to scatter in panic. Moments later, Lloyd's men open fire. Six drops low and uses the bench as the only cover available. The mercenaries begin killing police officers in the middle of the street, and even Suzanne is disturbed by the scale of it. Within moments, SWAT units arrive, and the whole area turns into a battlefield. Gunfire erupts from every direction as officers, tactical teams, and mercenaries collide in a massive street war. Six notices a weapon lying beneath the bench and stretches as far as he can to reach it. After struggling for a moment, he finally gets hold of it and uses it to take down one of the mercenaries. He then pulls the body of a dead police officer closer to use for cover and supplies. When no one is able to finish Six off, Lloyd loses patience and increases the reward. He offers an additional $10 million to whoever manages to kill him. Six grabs a fresh magazine, fires at an approaching van, breaks himself free from the bench, and makes a run for it. The mercenaries momentarily lose him in the chaos. Then they suddenly notice a tram beginning to move. Six has taken cover on it and starts shooting back at them. Several of the mercenaries manage to climb aboard, turning the moving tram into another battleground. A chase explodes through the streets and Miranda soon reappears. On the tram, Six fights off the men trying to capture him while also firing at the vehicles chasing from behind. He climbs onto the outside of the tram, holding on as the mercenaries fire grenades at it. Just as they are about to shoot at him again, Miranda drives straight into their van, smashing it off course. The impact sends the situation completely out of control, and the tram derails violently. Six keeps running, while Miranda reverses her car to reach him. Somehow, despite the destruction around them, both of them manage to survive and escape. Before getting into the vehicle, Six pauses for a brief moment and looks back at the wreckage left behind. Streets are torn apart, vehicles are destroyed, and bodies are scattered across the aftermath of the failed operation. Lloyd tries to contact anyone from his teams who might still be alive, but no one answers. Suzanne, furious and stunned, tells him that this may be the worst asset retrieval disaster in history. Then, unexpectedly, Lone Wolf responds. He says he is still tracking the target. Six and Miranda make their way to a hospital. Using an internal computer, they trace Claire's pacemaker signal and discover that she is being held in Croatia. As they leave, Lone Wolf suddenly appears. He attacks without warning, injuring Six's hand before launching into a fight with him. After the brief but brutal confrontation, Lone Wolf escapes by jumping through a window onto the roof and then making his way down to the ground. Police briefly stop him outside, but he attacks them too and gets away. Six and Miranda leave the hospital in a vehicle and continue moving. Later, they break into a veterinary clinic, where Six tries to treat the stab wound he has been carrying. While he patches himself up, Miranda asks about his past and why he was in prison, still trying to decide how much she can trust him. With no real choice left, Six tells her the truth. He explains that his father was obsessed with turning him and his brother into tough, masculine men, and he used brutal methods to do it. Over time, his father began focusing his cruelty on Six's brother. Six realized that eventually, either his brother would die or his father would. So, Six made the decision himself and killed his father. After that, everyone saw him as someone who belonged behind bars. The only person who looked at him differently was Fitzroy, the man who pulled him out and gave him another life. Meanwhile, a car arrives at Lloyd's estate. Lone Wolf steps out and enters the property, bringing the encrypted drive directly to Lloyd. At the same time, Six and Miranda move toward the outer perimeter of the estate. They trick several guards, take them down quietly, and steal their weapons. Inside the estate, Suzanne is growing increasingly uneasy. She tells Lloyd that no matter how far this operation has gone, he cannot kill Claire. Lone Wolf overhears the conversation and questions Lloyd, asking if he is really willing to murder a child. Lloyd turns on him sharply and warns him not to get involved. Suddenly, the power throughout the estate goes out. Almost immediately after, Miranda shoots down a helicopter, throwing the grounds into even more chaos. She moves through the castle area, exchanging fire with Lloyd's mercenaries and drawing attention away from Six. Inside, Fitzroy and Claire hear gunfire echoing through the halls. Fitzroy tells Claire to hide behind the bed. They listen as footsteps approach the room, fearing the worst. But when the door opens, it is Six. Relieved, they realize he has found them. Six quickly hands Fitzroy a weapon, and the sound of men moving in the corridor tells them they are not safe yet. Without wasting time, Six fires straight through the wall, hitting 3 attackers with 3 precise shots. Lloyd quickly understands what is happening. Miranda is creating a distraction outside so Six can get Fitzroy and Claire out. When Lloyd reaches the room where they had been held, he finds it empty, with dead guards on the floor. Enraged, he lashes out at the failure. Suzanne checks one of the screens and suddenly sees Miranda outside, aiming a rocket-propelled grenade directly at them. Meanwhile, Six, Fitzroy, and Claire climb across the roof, trying to escape. But Lloyd and his men spot them and open fire. During the attack, Fitzroy is hit. Knowing he will slow them down, he tells Six to take Claire and get her out safely while he stays behind to hold off the attackers. Six gives him an explosive to use as a last resort. Fitzroy then admits what has always been clear beneath everything. He loves Claire. Six grabs Claire and pulls her toward the edge of the roof. With no safer way out and bullets still flying behind them, the two leap off the building and plunge into the water below. Back inside the ruined room, Lone Wolf finds the hard drive just as Miranda enters. Before she can react, he attacks her, and the two are thrown into a harsh close-quarters fight. Lone Wolf eventually gets hold of a knife, and for a moment, it looks like Miranda is finished. But when he has the chance to seriously hurt her, he stops. Instead of killing her, he gives her the drive and says that the people they are working for have no honor. Then, he walks away, choosing not to be part of Lloyd's mess anymore. Meanwhile, Lloyd closes in on Fitzroy. But Fitzroy is ready. As Lloyd approaches, Fitzroy activates the explosive Six gave him. Lloyd barely manages to survive by diving behind one of his own men and using him as cover from the blast. After recovering, Lloyd races across the roof and jumps off the building, still determined to catch Six. Down below, Claire hides inside a boat while Six faces a group of armed men arriving in a vehicle. Before Six can fully deal with them, Lloyd comes charging straight at him and attacks. Claire notices a signal flare gun nearby. Acting quickly, she grabs it and fires it at Lloyd. The flare hits him, giving Six the opening he needs to shoot Lloyd in the hand. Six then avoids a final shot from a dying guard, but Lloyd uses the distraction to grab Claire. He takes the flare gun from her and drags her into a massive garden maze. Six follows them into the maze, moving carefully through the walls of greenery. Lloyd finally stops and uses Claire as leverage. He threatens Six and tells him to hand over his weapon, warning that if he refuses, he will ruin Claire's face. Six knows he cannot simply shoot his way out of this, so he changes tactics. He unloads his gun and throws the empty weapon toward Lloyd. Lloyd complains that he wanted the gun thrown with the bullets still inside. Six calmly replies that everyone knows you never throw a loaded weapon. Lloyd lets Claire go, and she immediately runs to Six, throwing her arms around him. Six tells her she has to leave. Claire, crying, begs him to come with her, but Six keeps his voice steady and tells her it is just another Thursday. Hearing that familiar phrase reassures her enough to move. Before leaving, she tells Six to beat Lloyd. Now alone, Six and Lloyd face each other in the maze. There is nothing left between them except the fight. They rush at each other and begin trading brutal blows. Lloyd's injured hand keeps hurting every time he hits Six because of the earlier gunshot wound, but he refuses to back down. The fight continues, getting uglier and more desperate. At one point, Six kicks Lloyd's head into a pot, leaving him stunned and in pain. Lloyd responds by grabbing a knife, turning the fight even more dangerous. Six is slashed and stabbed as the struggle becomes increasingly savage, but he keeps pushing forward. Eventually, Six manages to lock Lloyd into a hold he cannot escape from. It looks like the fight is finally about to end. But suddenly, a gunshot cuts through the air. Lloyd is struck directly in the heart. Suzanne steps out, holding a gun while Lloyd begins bleeding out. His reign of chaos ends there, not by Six's hand, but by Suzanne's. Then, without hesitation, she shoots Six in the leg to stop him from moving. Suzanne tells Six that she needs him to cooperate. She explains that Lloyd was an uncontrollable maniac and that he will be blamed for everything that happened, but to make that version of the story work, she needs Six alive as a witness. She warns him that if he wants Claire to remain safe, he will do exactly what she says. Still, she makes it clear that his reward will not be freedom. Eventually, he is going back to prison. Later, Claire watches as Six is carried away on a stretcher. Even in that condition, he gives her a quiet signal, and it brings a small smile of relief to her face. Suzanne is later seen holding the encrypted drive, but Carmichael eventually destroys it, erasing the evidence against him. 2 weeks later, Six wakes up handcuffed inside a remote facility. Around the same time, Suzanne, Carmichael, and Miranda are questioned by their superior about the disastrous events. In the end, they are cleared of responsibility and allowed to walk away. After the others leave, Miranda stays behind long enough to warn Carmichael. She tells him that if anything happens to Claire, she will come after him herself. Carmichael then asks where Claire is being kept. Suzanne tells him she has been placed inside a heavily protected residence in Virginia. He also asks about Six, and Suzanne says he is locked away in the basement, which is the most secure level of the facility. Carmichael thinks she should have killed him when she had the chance, but Suzanne believes Six might still be useful someday. In the elevator, the military police explain that Six has barely responded for days. They say he has been lying still, refusing food, and not acknowledging anyone. But when the elevator doors open at the secure level, everyone freezes. Six is gone. Suzanne curses when she reaches the floor and sees that he has escaped. Meanwhile, Claire is inside the guarded house in Virginia when she notices something strange. Her window has been opened. She looks around and finds a music disc along with a note telling her to play it loudly. Understanding immediately, Claire does exactly what the note says. As the music begins blasting through the room, guards outside start shouting. Moments later, gunfire erupts around the house. Then Six opens the door and steps into Claire's room. Claire is overwhelmed with happiness and rushes straight into his arms. In the final moments, the two leave the mansion together, get into a car, and drive away. When Netflix announced The Gray Manna, it didn't exactly feel like some small little action movie quietly being dropped onto the platform. This was supposed to be the big one. Ryan Gosling in the lead. Chris Evans playing the kind of villain role people were obviously going to talk about. Ana de Armas in the mix. Billy Bob Thornton. The Russo brothers behind the camera, coming off that whole Marvel-sized reputation where every frame feels like it has to be bigger than the last. And then, on top of all that, you had the budget conversation. Because that's the thing with The Gray Man. Before you even get to the movie itself, you already know it's expensive. You can almost feel Netflix trying to say, look, we can make a blockbuster too, not just a streaming movie, not just something you put on in the background while eating dinner. A real, globe-trotting, star-driven action spectacle. The kind of film that wants to sit at the same table as Bourne, Bond, John Wick, maybe even the Russo's own superhero work in terms of scale. And honestly, that expectation matters. Because when a movie arrives with this many names attached, and this much money clearly being thrown around, you don't walk in expecting something modest. You expect weight, you expect confidence, you expect the kind of action movie that knows exactly why it exists. But The Gray Man is interesting because it sort of does and doesn't live up to that promise at the same time. On one hand, yes, this thing is loud, it moves fast, it jumps from country to country. People are getting shot at, chased, blown up, punched through things, thrown out of things, and somehow still walking around like they just had a rough Thursday. You can see the movie trying very hard to give you that oversized popcorn thrill. But on the other hand, there's this weird question hanging over the whole thing. Was all of this really worth the money? Because the film has scale, no doubt. It has stars, it has explosions. It has that glossy Netflix blockbuster energy where every location feels like it was chosen partly because it looks good in a trailer. But expensive doesn't automatically mean memorable. And that's where The Gray Man starts to become a little more complicated than just Netflix made a big action movie. It feels like a gamble. A very expensive gamble. The kind where Netflix clearly wanted a franchise starter, something slick and easy to sell worldwide, with enough familiar ingredients that nobody would feel lost. A cool assassin, a corrupt agency, a psycho villain, a mysterious drive, a child in danger. A bunch of cities getting treated like action playgrounds. You've seen pieces of this before, many times actually. But the question is not really whether The Gray Man is original. It obviously isn't trying too hard to be. The real question is whether it can take all those familiar pieces and make them feel exciting enough that you stop caring. And for a while, it almost does. The actual setup of The Gray Man is pretty straightforward, and honestly, that's not automatically a bad thing. We meet Court Gentry, a man sitting in prison with the kind of past that already tells you the movie wants him to be damaged, dangerous, but not exactly evil. Then Donald Fitzroy walks in, played by Billy Bob Thornton, and offers him a way out, not freedom in the normal sense. More like freedom with a leash attached. He can stay locked away, or he can become useful. That's how Court becomes Sierra 6, an off-the-book CIA assassin trained to do the jobs nobody wants officially connected to the agency. No normal identity, no clean paper trail, no family waiting for him. Just a number, a handler, and a skill set that makes him extremely valuable until the second he becomes inconvenient. And of course, because this is that kind of movie, the mission that changes everything starts like any other assignment. 6 is sent to eliminate a target. Clean job, simple objective, move on. But the target turns out to be another Sierra operative, someone from the same secret program. Before dying, he gives 6 something the agency desperately wants back: evidence, secrets, a drive, whatever shape the movie needs the MacGuffin to take. The important thing is that 6 suddenly knows too much, and from there, the switch flips. The man who used to be the weapon becomes the problem. That's the part of the premise that works, at least on paper. There's something naturally watchable about a character being hunted by the very machine that created him. 6 isn't some random guy caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. He is the product of this system. They trained him, they sharpened him, they turned him into the person who can survive exactly this kind of situation. So when the CIA decides he needs to disappear, there's a built-in irony to it. They are not just chasing a rogue agent, they are chasing their own mistake. Now, is the setup original? Not really, let's be honest. We've seen the betrayed assassin story many times before. The secret program, the corrupt officials, the mysterious evidence, the global chase. None of this is new territory. The movie knows the shape of this genre and follows it pretty closely. But there is still a clean, functional hook here. 6 has the information. The agency wants it buried. Lloyd Hansen gets brought in to do the dirty work. And once Fitzroy's young niece Claire is pulled into the conflict, the story stops being just about survival and becomes a little more personal for 6. That emotional angle is important, because without it, he could easily become too cold to care about. Ryan Gosling plays him with that dry, almost unreadable calm, and the movie depends on small moments of loyalty and restraint to remind us there is still a person under all the training, so the premise is not complicated. A prisoner becomes an assassin, the assassin uncovers a secret, the secret makes him a target, and now everyone wants him dead. Simple, familiar, maybe too familiar. But for a big action movie, it gives the story enough fuel to start running. What makes the Sierra program interesting is not that it is completely new. It isn't. We've seen secret government programs in action movies before. We've seen agencies create monsters and then act shocked when those monsters stop following instructions. But the Sierra program does have a nasty little idea at its center. It takes people who already have nothing. No public image, no clean future, no one asking too many questions about where they went. Prisoners, damaged men, people who can be shaped into weapons because society has already thrown them away. The CIA doesn't really save them, it just repurposes them. And that's what 6 is. He isn't a James Bond type, walking into casinos with a government title and a nice suit. He isn't a celebrated agent with official backup and a fancy introduction. He is a ghost the agency can use when it needs something done quietly. If the mission works, great. If it fails, he never existed in any meaningful way. That's the darker little joke behind the name, the Gray Man. He's supposed to move through the world unnoticed. Not important enough to remember, not visible enough to trace. A man who can appear, finish the job, and disappear before anyone even knows what happened. Except the funny thing is, in this movie, 6 is almost never invisible. He is constantly in the middle of explosions, shootouts, car chases, collapsing vehicles, public chaos, and entire city blocks being turned into war zones. For a guy who is supposed to blend into the background, he spends a lot of time being the loudest person in the room. Still, the idea behind him works. Because underneath all the spectacle, there's something cold about the way the agency treats these people. They don't have names, they have numbers, they don't have lives, they have assignments. And the moment one of them learns too much, the same system that created him immediately starts looking for the delete button. That's where the movie has its strongest thematic material, even if it doesn't always dig into it deeply. 6 is not just running from Lloyd Hansen. He is running from the truth of what he has always been to these people. useful, disposable, and replaceable. The agency gave him a second life, but it was never really his. It was borrowed time, owned by someone else. And once he refuses to hand over what he knows, he stops being an asset. He becomes a loose end. That phrase is all over movies like this, but here it fits. 6 is a man who was recruited because no one would miss him, and now the people who recruited him are counting on that same invisibility to erase him cleanly. Only, they made one mistake. They trained him too well. The thing about The Gray Man is that you can feel the shape of the movie almost immediately. Not in a terrible way necessarily. More like the movie walks into the room wearing a very familiar jacket. A government-trained killer finds out something he was not supposed to know. The people above him panic. A corrupt official wants the evidence buried. The hero gets cut loose. Suddenly, every assassin with a gun, a passport, and a dramatic entrance is trying to kill him. We've been here before, a lot. That betrayed agent structure is practically its own subgenre at this point. You take one extremely capable man, strip away his support system, make the agency turn against him, then watch him survive through pure skill, pain tolerance, and the occasional sarcastic line. It's a clean formula because it works. Audiences understand it instantly. And The Gray Man understands that too. It doesn't waste much time pretending this is some deeply mysterious spy puzzle. It gives 6 the secret, puts a target on his back, and starts throwing bodies, bullets, and vehicles in his direction. The movie is not really asking you to solve anything, it is asking you to follow the chase. That's where the film is both comfortable and limited. Because on one hand, there is a reason this formula keeps coming back. There is something satisfying about watching a system lose control of the weapon it created. Especially when the people running that system are arrogant enough to think they can just press a button and make the problem disappear. But on the other hand, The Gray Man's rarely finds a fresh angle on it. The corrupt agency angle is familiar. The secret evidence is familiar. The unofficial assassin program is familiar. The hero who is quiet, wounded, and strangely decent underneath all the violence, familiar. Even the villain who treats human life like a joke feels like the movie checking off a box. It's not that these pieces can't work. They can. Sometimes they do. The issue is that the film often relies on the audience's memory of better versions of this story. It assumes we already know the emotional weight of betrayal, the danger of government corruption, the loneliness of being hunted, and the cool factor of a trained killer improvising his way out of impossible situations. So instead of building all of that from the ground up, it kind of rushes straight to the noise. And depending on what you want from the movie, that might be enough. If you came for a serious, layered spy thriller, this is probably where the disappointment starts creeping in. But if you came for Ryan Gosling being chased across the world while Chris Evans causes chaos in expensive shirts, then the familiar setup may not bother you much. Because The Gray Man is not trying to reinvent the Rogue Agent movie. It's trying to build a louder, shinier, Netflix-sized version of one. It's almost impossible to talk about The Gray Man without thinking of other action franchises. Not because the movie is secretly copying one specific thing scene for scene, but because it feels like it was built from the leftover DNA of several bigger, sharper, more memorable action movies. There is a lot of Bourne here. That whole idea of a government-trained asset being hunted by his own side, moving from city to city, staying alive through instinct and training. 6 has that same quiet, bruised, hyper-capable energy. He is not loud about how dangerous he is. He just keeps surviving. Then you get bits of John Wick, especially in the way the world suddenly seems full of assassins who can be activated against one man. Everyone has a gun. Everyone wants the bounty. Every location is just waiting to become a battleground. There's some Bond in the globe-trotting too. Fancy locations, shadowy intelligence people, a villain with a big personality, and action that clearly wants to feel international and expensive. Although, to be fair, Bond usually gives its locations more flavor. In The Gray Man, the countries sometimes feel less like places and more like loading screens between explosions. And then there's even a little bit of extraction in the Netflix action DNA. That same desire to prove streaming films can be massive, physical, violent, and theatrical looking. You can feel Netflix trying to build its own shelf of action brands, the kind where the title alone becomes enough to bring people back for sequels. The problem is, when a movie reminds you of this many other movies, it starts inviting comparisons it may not survive. Because Bourne had paranoia, John Wick had style, Bond had identity. Extraction had a kind of grounded physical intensity, even when it went huge. The Gray Man has pieces of all of that, but it doesn't always have one strong personality of its own. That doesn't mean it fails as entertainment. There are definitely moments where the movie's remix approach works. A little spy thriller here, a little assassin chaos there, a touch of buddy banter, a huge chase, a ridiculous villain, and suddenly you have something that is very easy to watch. But easy to watch is not the same as hard to forget, and that's where the comparisons become a little cruel. The film keeps reaching toward the feeling of those other franchises, but it rarely lands on the thing that made them special in the first place. It has the chase, but not always the tension. It has the fights, but not always the impact. It has the world travel, but not always the atmosphere. Still, I get why the movie was made this way. The ingredients are proven. Audiences like rogue agents, they like impossible survival scenes. They like assassins with mysterious pasts and corrupt agencies with too much power. So, the Gray Man takes all of that, mixes it together, and hopes the speed is enough to keep you from noticing how familiar the recipe is. And sometimes, honestly, the speed does help. But only sometimes. There's also the book angle, which is worth bringing up because the Gray Man isn't just some random original Netflix action idea. It comes from Mark Greaney's novel, and that matters a little because you can feel the film trying to launch something bigger than one movie. This isn't built like a one-and-done story. It has franchise starter written all over it. You got the mysterious lead character. You've got the secret program. You've got corrupt people inside powerful institutions. You've got enough loose ends and world-building pieces to suggest that Netflix wasn't just making a movie here. They were trying to create their own long-running action property. And honestly, from a business point of view, you can see why. If the books already exist, if there's already more material to adapt, and if audiences connect with Six as a character, then suddenly Netflix has its own version of a Bourne or a Reacher-type franchise. Not exactly the same thing, obviously, but something in that lane. A dependable action brand. New mission, new city, new villains, same quiet killer at the center. The problem is that when a movie is adapted from a book, people who know the source material are going to bring a different kind of expectation. And from the reactions around this film, there's definitely a sense that the novel had stronger material than what ended up on screen. The movie has the bones of a solid thriller, but it often feels like it has sanded down the details that might have made the story more distinct. It keeps the basic shape, the hunted assassin, the agency's secrets, the dangerous world around him, but it doesn't always give those ideas enough weight. That's usually where adaptations get tricky, because a book can sit inside a character's head. It can slow down, explain the pressure, build the paranoia, and make the world feel more tactical. A movie like this has to translate that into movement, conflict, and atmosphere. And the Gray Man mostly chooses movement. A lot of movement, maybe too much movement. Instead of letting the story breathe, the film often rushes toward the next set piece. So if there was more texture in the novel, more strategy, more tension, more sense of who court gentry really is, the movie doesn't always make room for it. It is more interested in turning the material into a giant action showcase. Now, that's not automatically a betrayal of the source. Some viewers will not care at all. They came for Ryan Gosling, Chris Evans, explosions, and a 2-hour chase. Fair enough. But for anyone hoping this would feel like a sharp, fully formed adaptation with a deeper spy thriller identity, the result may feel a bit thin. It has the foundation of a franchise. It has the lead actor. It has the budget. It has the title. But the thing that seems to be missing is the feeling that this story absolutely had to be told this way. And when people say the book is better, that's probably what they're reacting to. Not just that details were changed, but that the movie version feels less rich than the material it came from. The biggest problem with The Gray Man is not that the story is simple. Simple stories can work beautifully in action movies. Sometimes they work better that way. Give us a clear target, a clear threat, a hero we want to follow, and enough pressure to keep everything moving. That's all you really need if the execution has personality. But here, the story is not just simple, it's very, very familiar. You can almost predict the rhythm of it before the movie gets there. The secret mission goes wrong. The hero discovers the hidden truth. The agency turns against him. A ruthless outsider is brought in to clean up the mess. Someone innocent gets pulled into danger. The chase expands across multiple countries. And somewhere in the middle of all that, A USB drive or a piece of evidence becomes the most important object in the universe. It's not bad as a framework, it's just basic, and the movie does not always do enough to make that basic framework feel fresh. The strange thing is, The Gray Man has all the ingredients for something sharper. A secret CIA program made of discarded prisoners, a hero who owes his second life to the same people now trying to erase him, a villain who enjoys cruelty a little too much, a corrupt system protecting itself at any cost. There is material there. But instead of really digging into those ideas, the film mostly uses them as permission to get to the next explosion. The plot becomes a hallway. You walk through one scene, reach an action sequence, survive it, then move to the next location where the same thing happens again with bigger weapons. After a while, the story starts to feel less like it is unfolding and more like it is being dragged along by the set pieces. That's where the predictability starts to hurt, because when you are watching a movie like this, you don't necessarily need to be shocked every 5 minutes, but you do need some kind of pull. A twist in the character dynamic, a moral complication, a moment where the hero has to make a choice that actually feels difficult, something that makes the story feel alive instead of assembled. The Gray Man rarely gives you that. Most of the time, it stays exactly where you expect it to stay. 6 is the good assassin. The agency people are corrupt. Lloyd is the chaos machine. Danny is the ally who gets involved. Claire is the emotional pressure point. The evidence is the thing everyone wants. It's clean, sure, but it's also thin, and maybe that would matter less if the movie had more tension. But because the story is so familiar, you can feel the machinery working. You can see the movie placing pieces on the board, not because they are surprising or emotionally rich, but because this is what this kind of action thriller is supposed to have. That is why some viewers will probably have no issue with it at all. They are not here for story complexity. They want speed, stars, gunfire, and Ryan Gosling surviving things no human body should survive. Fair. But for a film this expensive, with this much talent involved, good enough to move things along, feels like a pretty low bar. The plot does its job, it just rarely does more than that. The script is where The Gray Man starts to show some real cracks. Because again, this is not a movie that needs Shakespeare-level writing. Nobody is pressing play on a Ryan Gosling assassin movie, expecting long philosophical monologues about power, guilt, and state violence. A few sharp lines, some clean motivation, a little tension between characters, and the story can keep moving. But even by action movie standards, the writing feels uneven. There are moments where the dialogue has a nice snap to it. Usually when Chris Evans is allowed to lean into Lloyd Hansen's smug, psychotic energy, the movie finds a bit of flavor. He gets the kind of lines that sound like they were written to be clipped, quoted, and passed around online. Sometimes they work, sometimes they're trying a little too hard. But at least there is a pulse there. The bigger issue is that outside of those bursts, a lot of the writing feels strangely flat. Characters explain things because the plot needs them explained. People trade insults that should feel sharper than they do. Emotional beats arrive, but they do not always have enough build-up to land properly. And sometimes the movie throws in a joke or a callback, as if it is expecting a bigger laugh than the scene actually earns. That's the problem with quippy writing. If the characters feel alive, the humor feels natural. If the characters feel thin, the jokes can start to sound like decoration. And The Gray Man often feels decorated. It has banter, it has tough guy lines, it has villain sarcasm. It has those little cool movie moments where someone says something right before violence breaks out. But the writing underneath is not always strong enough to make those moments feel effortless. You can almost feel the script pushing personality onto the characters, instead of letting personality come from them. 6 is calm. Lloyd is crazy. Danny is competent. Fitzroy is protective. Carmichael is corrupt. Claire is vulnerable but brave. Those are clear functions, and they work in a basic sense. But most of them do not get much beyond that. And when a movie is this crowded, that becomes a problem. There are so many people moving in and out of the story that the script barely has time to make anyone feel fully shaped. It keeps introducing names, agencies, handlers, assassins, officials, allies, and enemies. But a lot of them are there to push the chase forward, not to leave a real impression. That's probably why the dialogue stands out more when it fails. Because if the story had more suspense, or if the characters had more depth, you might forgive a clunky line here and there. But when the plot is already familiar, the dialogue needs to do more heavy lifting. It needs to give the movie texture. It needs to make the familiar setup feel like it has a voice. Instead, the script often feels like it is trying to sound cool rather than actually being cool. There's a difference. The strange part is that the movie has enough talented actors to make better writing sing. Ryan Gosling can do dry humor in his sleep. Chris Evans clearly understands the ridiculousness of Lloyd. Ana de Armas has the screen presence to make a thin role feel more alive than it probably is on paper. Billy Bob Thornton brings weight just by showing up. So the performances are not really the issue. The issue is that the script gives them a lot of movement, but not always enough material. Everyone is running, shooting, hiding, chasing, threatening, betraying, escaping. But when they stop to talk, the movie sometimes feels less confident than it does when it is blowing something up. And that matters, because action is stronger when the writing around it gives you a reason to care. Here, the script gives you enough to follow the movie, but not always enough to feel it. For all the running, shooting, crashing, escaping, and dramatic staring into the middle distance, the Gray Man has a weird problem. It is constantly busy, but it is not always tense. That sounds strange for a movie where the lead character is being hunted across the world by assassins, mercenaries, CIA officials, and one very angry Chris Evans with a mustache. On paper, this should be a pressure cooker. 6 has nowhere safe to go. Everyone wants the drive. His old handler is compromised. A child gets pulled into the mess. The agency is closing in. The ingredients are there, but the suspense never really grips the way it should. Part of that comes from how quickly the movie moves. It does not spend much time letting danger settle into a scene. Something bad happens, 6 reacts. Bullets fly, people scatter, and before you can really feel the weight of the situation, the movie is already pushing you toward the next set piece. That pace keeps the film from becoming boring, sure, but it also keeps the film from becoming truly suspenseful. Suspense needs a little patience. It needs silence sometimes. It needs uncertainty. It needs the feeling that a character might make the wrong choice, or that the trap closing around them is smarter than they are. The Gray Man's rarely gives you that feeling, because 6 is written like a man who can survive almost anything. Shot at? Fine. Stabbed? Fine. Thrown into impossible situations? Mostly fine. Caught in chaos that would destroy any normal human body? He'll probably limp for a minute and then keep going. After a while, that kind of invincibility starts to flatten the danger. You're not really asking, how is he going to survive this? You're asking, what ridiculous thing is he going to survive next? And that can be fun. I'm not pretending it can't. Action heroes have been defying basic anatomy for decades. But when the movie also wants us to feel corruption, betrayal, emotional stakes, and personal danger, the lack of real vulnerability becomes noticeable. The drama has the same issue. There are emotional pieces in the story, especially with Fitzroy and Claire, and those parts do give 6 something more human to protect. They help. Without that connection, he would feel even more like a walking action machine. But the movie does not always slow down enough to really let those relationships breathe. It wants the emotional payoff without spending too much time on the emotional build. So when the stakes rise, you understand them logically. You know why 6 cares. You know why Claire matters. You know why Fitzroy's situation is painful. But understanding is not the same as feeling. That is where a sharper spy thriller might have done more. It could have leaned into paranoia. It could have made the agency feel smarter, more suffocating, more impossible to escape. It could have made the secrets feel dangerous beyond just being a reason for chase scenes. It could have given 6 a moral dilemma that actually complicates him. Instead, the movie mostly keeps things clean. The bad people are bad. The good assassin is good. The villain is openly monstrous. The mission is survival. There is not much mystery in that. Not much gray area either, which is kind of funny considering the title. And that might be the film's biggest missed opportunity. It has the look of a spy thriller, the structure of a conspiracy movie, and the scale of a global chase. But it rarely creates that knot-in-your-stomach feeling that the best films in this genre can deliver. It gives you motion, it gives you noise, it gives you danger in a technical sense. But real suspense, real intrigue, not nearly enough. The characters in The Gray Man are easy to understand, but not always easy to feel invested in. And that's an important difference. Everyone has a clear role. 6 is the quiet weapon with a conscience. Lloyd Hansen is the chaos villain. Danny Miranda is the capable agent who gets dragged into the mess. Fitzroy is the mentor figure with emotional history. Claire is the innocent person who gives the story a softer human angle. Carmichael is the corrupt suit trying to protect himself. On paper, that all works. You know who everyone is supposed to be within seconds of meeting them. The movie is very good at assigning functions. This person protects. This person betrays. This person threatens. This person cracks a joke. This person runs into danger. Nobody is confusing. But the problem is, being clear is not the same as being deep. A lot of these characters feel like they were built from action movie shorthand. They are not badly performed exactly. In fact, the cast is one of the reasons the film stays watchable. The issue is that the writing rarely gives them enough inner life. Most of them are interesting because of the actors playing them, not because the characters themselves are especially layered. 6 is probably the best example. Ryan Gosling gives him that calm, dry, almost unreadable energy, and it fits the role. He looks like a man who has trained himself not to react too much, not to say too much, not to let the world see what is going on under the surface. That can be compelling, but the movie sometimes mistakes silence for depth. We get pieces of who 6 is. We know he has a painful past. We know he is not just a mindless killer. We know he has enough compassion to make choices that put him in danger. But the film does not really dig into the emotional cost of being this person. It gives him a backstory, then keeps him moving so quickly that we rarely sit with what that backstory means. The same thing happens with Dani. Ana de Armas has presence, and every time she enters the action, the movie gets a little more alive. But the character herself is kept mostly practical. She is competent, sharp, useful, and involved in the plot, but there is not enough there to make her feel fully defined beyond the mission. Lloyd Hansen is more colorful, definitely. Chris Evans gives him energy. He has the mustache, the outfits, the cruelty, the smug little smile, the complete lack of shame. He is designed to be memorable, and in many ways, he is. But even Lloyd is more of a performance concept than a fully developed person. He is evil because the movie needs someone loudly evil. He enjoys violence because that makes him dangerous and funny. It works scene by scene, but there is not much under it. That is where the movie starts to feel thinner than it should. Because with a cast this strong, you expect at least a few character dynamics to really pop. You expect tension, history, chemistry, emotional friction. But so many relationships are sketched quickly and then pushed aside so the next action sequence can begin. The film gives us enough to understand the stakes. It does not always give us enough to care about them deeply. And again, this is not some slow character drama. Nobody is asking the gray man to stop for 20 minutes and unpack everyone's childhood trauma. But even action movies need personality. They need little details that make people feel specific. A habit, a contradiction, a choice that surprises us, a conversation that reveals something beyond plot mechanics. Here, most characters are exactly what they appear to be. The hero is heroic. The villain is villainous. The corrupt official is corrupt. The ally becomes an ally. The innocent kid makes the hero softer. It is all functional. But functional can only take you so far. The result is a movie full of people who are constantly in danger, but not always full of people you feel connected to. You can enjoy watching them run, fight, escape, and survive. You just may not remember much about them once the noise stops. Ryan Gosling is probably the main reason. The Gray Manny works as well as it does. Not because Sierra 6 is some incredibly complex character on the page. He really isn't. The movie gives him the usual ingredients: tragic past, military-level training, quiet personality, moral code, dry sense of humor, and the ability to survive injuries that would send most people straight into a hospital bed for 6 months. But Gosling has this way of making underwritten characters feel more interesting than they should. He doesn't push too hard. That's the key thing. A role like this could easily become stiff if the actor treats every scene like a serious action hero pose. But Gosling plays 6 with a kind of tired calm. He's not trying to look cool every second, which weirdly makes him cooler. He looks like a man who has been through so much nonsense that even being hunted by half the intelligence world is just another bad day at work. There's a dryness to him that helps the movie a lot. When 6 throws out a line, it doesn't feel like he is begging for a laugh. It comes out almost casually, like he doesn't have the energy to be more dramatic about it. That fits the character. He is not loud. He is not flashy. He is not doing speeches about justice or revenge. Most of the time, he just wants to get through the next impossible situation without dying, and that makes him easy to root for. Gosling also brings a little softness to the role, which the movie badly needs. because without that, Six could have become just another silent assassin with a gun and a sad backstory. The scenes involving Claire help bring that out. You get the sense that he is not naturally emotional, or at least not someone who knows how to show it easily. But he does have a protective instinct. He does care. He just keeps it buried under all that training and sarcasm. That is where Gosling is smart in the performance. He doesn't suddenly turn Six into a warm, expressive hero. He lets the humanity come through in small amounts. A pause here, a glance there, a slightly softer delivery when the moment calls for it. It's not huge emotional acting, but it gives the character just enough life beneath the surface. Still, there is a limit to what he can do. The film sometimes leans so hard into Six being calm and unshakable that he starts to feel almost too detached from the chaos around him. Cars crash, buildings explode, people are trying to kill him from every direction, and he often reacts like someone mildly annoyed by a delayed flight. That's funny at times, and it definitely suits the movie's tone, but it can also make the danger feel less intense. If the hero barely reacts, the audience sometimes follows his lead. So yes, Gosling is good here. He has the physical presence, the timing, the restraint, and that quiet movie star quality where he can hold the frame without doing much. He makes Sierra Six feel watchable even when the script does not give him a lot to say or reveal. But the performance is stronger than the character. That's the honest way to put it. Gosling gives the gray man a steady center. He makes the familiar material easier to enjoy. He gives the movie a lead you can follow through all the explosions, double crosses, and ridiculous survival moments. I just wish the film had given him a little more to actually carry emotionally. Chris Evans is having a very different kind of fun in The Greymong, and honestly, you can feel it almost immediately. After years of being locked in the public imagination as Captain America, clean-cut, noble, heroic, morally centered, Lloyd Hansen feels like Evans walking into the movie and saying, "Yeah, let's do the opposite of that." The mustache alone feels like a declaration of war. Not a subtle one either. It's ridiculous, it's smug, and it tells you everything you need to know before he even opens his mouth. Lloyd is not written as a complicated villain. He is a psychopath in expensive clothes. That's basically the pitch. He enjoys cruelty. He has no real concern for collateral damage. He treats human life like paperwork. If an entire city square needs to be ripped apart just to get one man, fine. If innocent people get caught in the middle, that's not a moral problem to him. That's just noise around the mission. And Evans leans all the way into that. There's no attempt to make Lloyd quietly menacing or psychologically layered. He is loud, theatrical, irritating, funny, dangerous, and completely pleased with himself. He's the kind of villain who doesn't just want to win. He wants to enjoy the process of making everyone else miserable. For some viewers, that makes him the best part of the movie, because whenever Lloyd enters a scene, the energy changes. The film suddenly has more bite. Evans gives him this spoiled, vicious confidence, like a man who has never once considered that consequences might apply to him. He smiles at the wrong moments. He says awful things with casual brightness. He walks around like he is the smartest guy in the room, even when he is creating chaos on a scale that makes no practical sense. That kind of performance can be very entertaining, but it also depends on how much exaggeration you're willing to accept. Because Lloyd is not exactly realistic, he's not the kind of villain who makes you think, yes, this is probably how a dangerous private contractor would behave. He feels more like an action movie cartoon with good tailoring. Sometimes that works, because the whole film is already operating at an inflated level. But sometimes, it makes him feel less threatening than the movie wants him to be. There's a difference between being evil and being menacing. Evans absolutely nails the evil part. The smugness, the cruelty, the joy he takes in violence, all of that comes through. But whether Lloyd feels truly frightening is a little more debatable. At times, he is so performative that he becomes more funny than scary. You watch him less as a terrifying force and more as Chris Evans enjoying the chance to be awful for 2 hours. And to be fair, that enjoyment is contagious. Even when the writing around him is thin, Evans gives the film some much-needed personality. His one-liners have more flavor than most of the dialogue. His presence adds friction to scenes that might otherwise feel too mechanical. And his contrast with Gosling works because they are playing completely opposite energies. Six is controlled. Lloyd is chaos. Six hides emotion. Lloyd performs every rotten thought in his head. Six wants to survive and protect. Lloyd wants to dominate, humiliate, and win loudly. That contrast gives the movie a simple but effective hero-villain rhythm. Still, Lloyd could have been more memorable with stronger writing. The performance has the surface, the look, the attitude, the jokes, the cruelty. What it doesn't really have is a deeper core. We don't learn much about what made him this way or why he operates with such cartoonish confidence. The movie doesn't seem especially interested in that. It just wants him to be the human grenade thrown into the plot. And as that, he works. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not subtly, definitely not realistically. But in a film that often feels too polished and generic for its own good, Chris Evans gives the Gray Man something messy, sharp, and weirdly alive. He may not be the most convincing villain in the world, but he is one of the few characters who actually feels like he's having a pulse. A very twisted pulse, sure, but a pulse. Ana de Armas is one of those actors who can walk into an action movie and immediately make the frame feel sharper. And in The Gray Man, she does that. Danny Miranda is not introduced as some helpless side character who exists only to be impressed by Sierra 6. She is capable from the start. She knows the world they are operating in. She can handle herself in a fight. She can read a situation quickly, and when the movie actually gives her something to do, Ana de Armas brings a clean, focused energy to it. The issue is that the movie does not give her enough. That's the frustrating part, because you can see the potential for Danny to be more than just the agent who keeps showing up when 6 needs backup. There is a good dynamic waiting to happen there. She is not exactly his partner, not exactly his friend, not exactly a romantic interest, not exactly just a fellow professional either. The movie plays around with that uncertainty a little, but it never really develops it into anything especially memorable, and that feels like a missed chance. With Ryan Gosling's 6 being so quiet and controlled, Danny could have been a stronger contrast. She could have challenged him more. She could have brought out different sides of him. She could have been more deeply tied into the agency politics, the corruption, or the moral mess of the Sierra program. Instead, she mostly becomes useful. That sounds harsh, but that's how the film treats her much of the time. She's there to save him, cover him, fight beside him, get information, move the plot forward, and look competent doing it. And Ana de Armas does all of that well. The problem is not the performance. The problem is the space around the performance. You can feel the movie wanting us to enjoy her presence, and we do. But enjoying someone's presence is not the same as knowing the character. Danny has attitude, skill, and screen presence. What she lacks is enough personal texture. The film tells us enough to understand her function in the story, but not enough to make her feel as vivid as she could have been. It's especially noticeable because Ana de Armas has already proven she can steal scenes in action, heavy roles when given the right material. Here, she has moments where that spark comes through. A look, a line, the way she moves through a fight. There is confidence there. There is personality there. But the script keeps pulling her back into the machinery. And that's a shame, because in a movie this crowded, a character like Danny needed 1 or 2 really specific moments to stand apart. Not just another shootout, not just another rescue, something that told us who she is when she is not reacting to 6, Lloyd, or the agency's chaos. Still, she helps the movie. Every time the story risks becoming just Ryan Gosling running from one impossible situation to another, Danny gives it a slightly different rhythm. She brings urgency, she brings competence, she makes the action feel less one note. But by the end, I was left with that annoying feeling of liking what Ana de Armas brought to the role more than the role itself. She is good in the movie, she just deserved a better written part. The supporting cast in The Gray Man is honestly one of the reasons the movie stays more watchable than the writing sometimes deserves. Because when you look at the names here, it's kind of ridiculous. Billy Bob Thornton, Alfre Woodard, Regé-Jean Page, Jessica Henwick, Julia Butters. These are not people you cast if you want the background of your movie to feel empty. There is real talent scattered all over this thing. And Billy Bob Thornton especially knows exactly what kind of movie he is in. As Donald Fitzroy, he gives the film a little bit of old-school weight. He is the man who recruits court gentry, the person who turns him into Sierra 6, but there is enough warmth in Thornton's performance to keep Fitzroy from feeling like just another shady CIA handler. You can sense history there. Regret, maybe. Responsibility. He is part of the system, but he is not completely swallowed by it. That matters, because Fitzroy is one of the few characters who gives 6 a human connection before the chaos really takes over. The relationship is not explored as deeply as it could be, but Thornton has a way of filling in the gaps. He can make a simple line feel like it has years behind it. He doesn't need to overplay anything. He just brings this tired, dry presence that fits the world of the movie. He feels like someone who has seen enough ugly things to stop being surprised by them. Alfre Woodard brings a similar kind of credibility. Her role is not huge, but she gives the film a steadier dramatic tone whenever she appears. There is something about her screen presence that immediately suggests intelligence and history. You believe she knows how this world works. You believe she has survived inside it. And even with limited screen time, she gives her scenes a little more texture than the script necessarily provides. That's the advantage of casting actors like this. They bring weight with them. Regé-Jean Page, on the other hand, is playing more of a clean-cut corruption figure. Denny Carmichael is not exactly subtle. He is the kind of powerful official who looks polished on the outside but is clearly rotting underneath. The problem is that the movie does not give him much beyond that. He is there to be smug, dangerous, and protected by institutional power. Page does what the role asks, but the character feels more like a plot engine than a person. Julia Butters also plays an important role as Claire because she gives the movie its most obvious emotional stake. Without her, Six's mission could feel too mechanical. Claire turns the chase into something more personal. She gives Six someone to protect, someone who can pull a softer side out of him, and someone who reminds us that beneath the assassin programming, he is still capable of loyalty. That said, the movie walks a familiar line with her. She is there to be vulnerable, but not completely helpless. She is brave enough to avoid feeling like just an object in danger, though the story still uses her mainly as emotional pressure. And then there's Jessica Henwick, who is good, because Jessica Henwick is usually good. But again, you get that feeling that the movie has more cast than character space. She has presence, she fits the world, but the script does not really give her the kind of material that would let her stand out as much as she could. That's kind of the pattern with the supporting cast overall. The actors are doing a lot of quiet rescue work. They give scenes personality when the writing is thin. They make exposition easier to sit through. They add little bits of flavor to a movie that might otherwise become just action, sarcasm, and explosions. But many of them feel underused because the film is always rushing toward the next big set piece. So the cast is impressive, no question. But the movie sometimes treats that impressive cast like expensive decoration. It puts talented people in the frame, gives them just enough to establish their function, and then moves on. Still, even with limited material, they help. Thornton brings warmth and grit, Woodard brings authority, Butters brings emotional stakes, Page brings polished corruption, Henwick brings sharp presence. The film may not always know what to do with all of them, but it is definitely better because they are there. Dhanush's role in The Gray Man is not huge, but it does leave an impression. And that is mostly because the movie uses him in a very specific way. He enters the story as Avik, another assassin pulled into the hunt for Six. At first, he feels like one more dangerous piece on the board, another hired killer, another obstacle, another person who can walk into a scene and immediately make things worse for the hero. In a movie already packed with mercenaries and armed professionals, that could have easily made him disappear into the background. But Dhanush has a presence that cuts through the noise. There's something controlled about the way he plays. Avik, he doesn't need to be loud. He doesn't need to chew scenery like Lloyd Hansen. He doesn't need constant jokes or dramatic speeches. He comes in with a quiet intensity, and that actually makes him stand out in a film where so many other things are trying very hard to be big. His action scenes have a different flavor, too. The movie gives him a brief but brutal space to show what Avik can do, and for those few minutes, the film feels sharper. He moves with purpose. The violence around him has a different rhythm. It's not just random chaos or another explosion-heavy chase. It feels more personal, more physical, more direct. And honestly, that's refreshing, because the Grey Mana often goes so huge that the action starts to blur together. Cars, bullets, drones, planes, streets getting destroyed. After a while, scale can lose impact. But when Avik enters the fight, the movie becomes a little more focused. It remembers that sometimes one dangerous person in a room can be more exciting than an entire city being torn apart. The interesting thing is that Avik is not just treated as a disposable henchman, at least not completely. There is a small moral turn in his character, and while the movie does not spend a lot of time building toward it, it gives him just enough humanity to feel like more than another assassin collecting a paycheck. He has a line he will not cross. In a film full of corrupt officials, psychopaths, and people willing to burn everything down for power, that small bit of principle actually matters. It does not suddenly make him a deeply developed character. Let's be fair, he is still underused. Like a lot of people in this movie, he feels as if he could have been more interesting if the script had given him an extra scene or two. There's clearly a sharper character sitting somewhere inside this performance, but the film is too busy racing forward to explore him properly. Still, for the screen time he gets, Dhanush makes it count. He brings a different energy to the movie, not sarcastic like Gosling, not cartoonishly cruel like Evans, not polished and political like the CIA characters. He feels more disciplined, more internal, almost like he belongs to a slightly more serious version of this film. And that makes you wish the movie had used him more. Because Avik is the kind of supporting character who could have easily become one of the film's strongest wildcards. Instead, he appears, makes an impact, gives the action a needed jolt, and then the story moves on. But even in a limited role, Dhanush proves something. You don't always need the biggest part to be memorable. Sometimes you just need a few minutes, a clear presence, and the ability to make the audience wonder why the movie didn't give you more. Wagner Moura shows up in The Gray Man, and, for a little while, the movie gets a different kind of spark. His role is not massive. He is not one of the main emotional anchors, and the story does not stop to build a whole arc around him. But he brings something the film actually needs, personality that does not feel completely manufactured by the action formula. He plays the talkative tech guy type, the person who has information, access, tools, contacts, basically one of those characters who exists to help the hero move from one stage of the plot to the next. In a weaker version of this role, he could have just been a walking exposition machine, someone who explains where to go, what to do, and which device matters. But Moura makes him more entertaining than that. There's a looseness to him, a slightly chaotic charm. He feels like someone who wandered in from a stranger, funnier, maybe more eccentric version of the movie. And because The Gray Man can sometimes become very mechanical, mission, chase, fight, escape, repeat, that kind of offbeat energy helps break the rhythm. You notice him because he does not feel like another cold professional in a world full of cold professionals. A lot of the characters in this film are either trained killers, corrupt officials, or intelligence people speaking in tense little fragments. So when someone comes in with a more talkative, slightly unpredictable vibe, it gives the movie a bit of breathing room. Not emotional depth exactly, but texture. A reminder that this world does not have to be all grim faces and tactical instructions, and that matters more than it sounds. Because side characters in action movies can do a lot of heavy lifting. They can make the world feel bigger. They can add humor without turning the whole thing into a comedy. They can give the hero someone different to bounce off. They can make a scene memorable even when the actual plot function is pretty basic. That's what happens here. Wagner Moura does not completely change the movie, but he gives his scenes a little extra flavor. He makes the information delivery parts feel less dry. He finds a comic rhythm without making it seem like he is begging for attention. And in a film where some characters feel underwritten, that kind of natural screen presence goes a long way. The frustrating part is the same issue we keep running into with this cast. You want more, not necessarily a whole subplot, because the movie is already crowded enough, but just enough extra space to let the character become more than a fun detour. There's a sense that he could have been used to add more weirdness, more humor, maybe even a bit more unpredictability to the film's middle stretch. Instead, he arrives, livens things up, does his job, and the movie moves on. Still, it says something that he stands out at all. In a film loaded with stars, action scenes, explosions, and expensive chaos, Wagner Moura manages to make a small role feel memorable by simply giving it a human pulse. He is not the center of The Gray Man, but for the time he is there, he makes the movie feel a little less generic. And honestly, this movie needed more of that. Jessica Henwick is one of those performers who can make a small role feel sharper than it probably looked on the page, and in The Gray Man, that is exactly what happens. She plays Suzanne Brewer, one of the CIA figures caught inside all this agency corruption, damage control, and internal power games. She is not the loudest character in the movie. She is not given the wildest action beat, the biggest emotional scene, or the flashiest dialogue. But there is something about Henwick's presence that makes you pay attention anyway. She has that controlled intensity, the kind where you can tell the character is measuring every room she walks into. Suzanne feels more polished than most of the chaos around her, but not harmless. She is part of the system, and the movie does make you feel that she understands how dirty that system can get. She is not swinging weapons through Prague or chewing scenery like Lloyd Hansen, but she belongs to the same dangerous world. The frustrating thing is that the film never really lets her become as interesting as she could have been. That is the recurring issue with The Gray Man. It has this huge cast full of people who are capable of bringing more texture to the story, but the movie keeps treating many of them like moving pieces on a board. Suzanne has potential. You can imagine a version of this film where she becomes a much more layered figure, someone caught between ambition, survival, loyalty, and disgust at what the agency is doing. But here, she mostly remains underwritten. She is useful to the plot. She helps represent the internal CIA side of the story. She gives the film another face inside the institutional mess. But we do not spend enough time with her to fully understand what she wants beyond staying alive politically and physically inside this situation. And that is a shame, because Henwick has the kind of screen presence that can handle moral ambiguity. She does not need a lot to suggest there is more going on beneath the surface. A look, a pause, a clipped line delivery, she can make a character feel like she is holding back information. That would have fit perfectly in a sharper spy thriller. This type of story should be full of people whose loyalties are uncertain and whose motives are not easy to read. Instead, the movie is usually too busy racing toward the next action scene. So Suzanne never gets the room to become a genuinely memorable player. She is there, she does her job, and Henwick gives her more edge than the script provides. But when the movie ends, you are left thinking less about what Suzanne added and more about what she could have added if the writing had cared a little more. That is probably the best way to describe the role. Not bad, just thin. And with an actor like Jessica Henwick, thin feels like a waste. Because every time she appears, you can sense a more interesting version of the movie hovering nearby, one where the CIA characters are not just corrupt suits and tactical voices, but complicated people making ugly choices for specific reasons. The Gray Man does not really become that movie. It uses Henwick well enough to keep the machinery moving, but not well enough to make you stop thinking she deserved more. The funny thing about The Gray Man is that the cast is doing a lot more work than the characters are. That sounds a bit harsh, but it's true. If you just read the names attached to this movie, it feels stacked. Ryan Gosling, Chris Evans, Ana de Armas, Billy Bob Thornton, Alfre Woodard, Regé-Jean Page, Jessica Henwick, Dhanush, Wagner Moura. That is a strong lineup. Strong enough that before the movie even starts, you expect the screen to have a certain energy just because of who is in it. And to be fair, the actors do bring that energy. Gosling gives the film a calm center. Evans gives it chaos. Ana de Armas brings sharpness. Thornton adds warmth and old-school grit. Alfre Woodard gives her scenes weight. Dhanush brings quiet intensity. Wagner Moura adds some looseness and humor. Jessica Henwick makes a thin role feel more alert than it probably deserved. So the performances are not the main problem. The problem is that the movie often gives these actors roles instead of people. There's a difference. A role is a function. The hero, the villain, the handler, the ally, the corrupt official, the assassin, the kid in danger, the tech contact. Those are all useful pieces in an action movie, and the Gray Man suit knows exactly where to place them. But a person needs more than a function. A person has contradictions, specific habits, emotional blind spots, little moments that don't just serve the plot, but reveal something. And that is where the film comes up short. It keeps giving its cast just enough material to move the story forward, but not enough to make the characters feel fully lived in. That is why some scenes work better than they probably should. You are not always responding to the writing. You are responding to the actor carrying it. When Billy Bob Thornton speaks to Six, the movie suddenly feels like there is more history there than the script has actually shown us. When Ana de Armas enters an action scene, Danny feels more compelling than her limited writing suggests. When Chris Evans starts behaving like a spoiled psychopath in a vacation shirt, Lloyd becomes memorable partly because Evans is clearly making choices the script itself does not fully deepen. The cast keeps adding texture, the screenplay keeps flattening it, and after a while, you can feel that tension. The movie wants to be a slick ensemble action thriller, but it does not really give the ensemble enough room to breathe. Characters appear, make an impression, serve their purpose, and then get pulled back into the machinery. It is a strange kind of waste, because the ingredients are clearly there. Imagine if Danny had a stronger personal conflict. Imagine if Suzanne had a more complicated moral position. Imagine if Lloyd had a little more psychological edge instead of just surface-level cruelty. Imagine if Six's relationship with Fitzroy had been given more time to feel genuinely painful. None of that would require turning the movie into a slow drama. It would just require a few more scenes where the characters matter as much as the action. But the Gray Man is always in a hurry. And because it is always in a hurry, the cast becomes a kind of shortcut. The movie relies on our affection for these actors, their charisma, their screen presence, their ability to make thin material look better than it is. That works for a while. It keeps the film entertaining. It keeps scenes from completely collapsing. It gives the movie flashes of personality even when the writing is generic, but it also makes the weakness more obvious. Because when you have actors this good and still end up with characters this thin, you start to realize the problem was never talent. It was material. The Gray Man's has the cast of a much richer movie. It just doesn't always have the character writing to match. If there is one thing the Gray Man's absolutely wants to sell you, it is action. Not subtle action. Not quiet, tactical, slow-burn action. Not the kind where people whisper in hotel rooms for 40 minutes before one precise fight breaks out in a hallway. No, this movie is basically allergic to sitting still. From very early on, it starts moving, and once it does, it rarely gives itself much permission to breathe. Someone is always being followed, hunted, chased, shot at, betrayed, kidnapped, punched, or thrown into another ridiculous situation. The film is built like a 2-hour sprint where every few minutes it looks over its shoulder and says, wait, we haven't blown something up recently. And honestly, for a lot of viewers, that is going to be the appeal. Because when the Gray Man stops pretending to be a sharp spy thriller and simply becomes a giant action machine, it is much easier to enjoy. The movie has no shortage of movement. It gives you gunfights, fistfights, car chases, explosions, collapsing vehicles, public chaos, close-range combat, long-range attacks, and characters surviving things that would absolutely finish a normal person. It is not restrained. At all. But there is a certain pleasure in that kind of excess when you are in the mood for it. This is the sort of film you put on when you do not want to think too hard about intelligence agency politics or whether the plot makes complete sense. You want momentum. You want noise. You want Ryan Gosling in survival mode while the world around him keeps getting more expensive to repair. And on that level, the movie often delivers. The action is constant enough that boredom rarely has time to settle in. Even when the story feels thin, even when the characters are not as developed as they should be, the film keeps throwing new problems at Six. There is always another obstacle, another location, another group of armed men arriving with terrible timing. That pace can be exhausting, but it is also part of the movie's personality. The Gray Man is not trying to seduce you with elegance. It is trying to overwhelm you with scale, and sometimes that works. There are moments where the sheer energy of it becomes entertaining in a very simple popcorn movie way. You stop asking whether any of this is plausible and just let the chaos happen. Not every action movie has to be smart. Some of them just need to hit hard enough, move fast enough, and give you enough visual spectacle to make the runtime pass quickly. The problem is that action can only carry a movie so far. When it is great, it can make you forgive a lot. Weak story? Fine. Thin characters? Fine. Familiar setup? Fine. But when the action becomes too repetitive, too messy, or too weightless, those other weaknesses start coming back into view, and the Gray Man sits right on that line. At its best, it is an energetic, bruising, overstuffed action ride that knows exactly what button to press for easy entertainment. At its weakest, it feels like the movie is using action to avoid dealing with its own lack of depth. Still, I can't pretend the action is not the reason most people will watch it. It is. This movie is not selling mystery. It is not selling emotional complexity. It is not selling a fresh take on the spy genre. It is selling spectacle. And if that is what you came for, the Gray Man has plenty of it. Now, the action in the Gray Man is not just big, it is absurdly big. And I don't mean that in a quiet, mildly exaggerated action movie way. I mean, this is the kind of movie where a normal chase scene is apparently not enough. A fight can't just be a fight. A gun battle can't just be a gun battle. Every major sequence has to keep escalating until it feels like the film is daring you to ask how any human body, vehicle, building, or public square is still functioning. Six doesn't just survive danger. He survives situations that feel personally offensive to physics. And look, that can be fun. There is a reason movies like this exist. We don't always watch action films because we want a documentary-level understanding of how CIA operations work. Sometimes we want ridiculous survival scenes, impossible escapes, and one man somehow outlasting an army of people who apparently all graduated from the same terrible aiming school. So in the right mood, the exaggeration works. There is a wild, messy entertainment value in watching the movie push itself further and further. A plane sequence turns into complete madness. A city becomes a battlefield. Vehicles are smashed, bullets are flying everywhere, people are getting thrown around, and Six just keeps moving like his bones are made of government funding. That kind of thing is not realistic, obviously. But realism is not always the point. The problem is that the gray man sometimes acts like it wants the weight of a grounded spy thriller while staging action like a superhero movie without costumes. That creates a weird disconnect. The story wants us to buy into secret programs, agency corruption, black ops politics, and the dangerous world of professional killers. But then the action gets so extreme that the whole thing starts to feel detached from the world it claims to exist in. If this were a full fantasy action universe, fine. Blow up everything. Throw people through every surface available. Let the villain turn half a city into a war zone. But when the movie is still dressed like a CIA thriller, there are moments where you can't help thinking, there is absolutely no way anyone would get away with this. And that thought can pull you out of the movie, because the scale becomes less thrilling when it starts feeling random. After a while, the question is not whether Six will survive. Of course he will. The question is how much destruction the film can stack on top of him before the scene finally ends. There are viewers who will love that. For them, the bigger and dumber the action gets, the better. And honestly, I understand it. Sometimes an action movie earns your goodwill simply by refusing to be boring. The Gray Man definitely refuses to be boring in the traditional sense. It keeps throwing chaos at the screen with the confidence of a movie that believes momentum can solve almost anything. But if you need even a little bit of plausibility, the film can become exhausting. Not because every action beat is bad, but because so many of them are inflated past the point of impact. When everything is massive, nothing feels especially massive anymore. When every danger is impossible, danger itself starts to feel meaningless. That is the strange thing about over-the-top action. A little exaggeration can make a movie exciting. Too much can make it weightless. And the Gray Man spends a lot of time dancing right on that edge, sometimes landing on the fun side, sometimes landing on the ridiculous side, and sometimes landing so far beyond both that you just sit there thinking, okay, sure, I guess he survived that too. The Prague sequence is probably the part of the Gray Man's people remember first. And honestly, that makes sense. If the movie was built to prove that Netflix could throw blockbuster money at the screen, this is the section where you can actually see that ambition most clearly. The scale opens up. The streets turn into a battlefield. The action spills out into public space. Cars, guns, explosions, civilians running, police chaos, mercenaries closing in from every direction. It is the film doing its biggest look what we can afford moment. And for a while, it works. There is a real sense of escalation in that sequence. It does not feel like just another hallway fight or another warehouse shootout. The movie stretches the action across a wider space, and that gives the scene a kind of messy, dangerous energy. Six is not just fighting one person. He is trapped inside a situation that keeps getting worse every few seconds. That is when the Gray Man Z feels closest to becoming the giant action spectacle it clearly wants to be. The Prague section has movement. It has size. It becomes especially noticeable during action scenes because action needs clarity. You can have chaos, you can have smoke, you can have flashing lights and moving cameras, but the audience still needs to understand what they are looking at. If the frame is too dark or too visually cluttered, the choreography loses impact before the editing even gets involved. And the Gray Man already has a lot going on. Fast cuts, drone shots, explosions, gunfire, people moving through crowded spaces. Once you add muddy lighting on top of that, some sequences become more exhausting than exciting. The film keeps throwing spectacle at you, but then occasionally hides that spectacle under a visual style that feels heavier than it needs to be. That's what makes the budget conversation even stranger. You know this movie cost a lot. You know it has big stars, big locations, big set pieces, expensive destruction, so when parts of it look visually flat or hard to read, it creates a disconnect. You start asking why a film with this much money doesn't always feel as sharp or cinematic as it should. To be fair, there are moments where the darker look does help. It can give certain scenes a harder edge. It can make the world feel grimmier, more paranoid, less like clean studio spectacle. And in a movie about disposable agents and corrupt power, a little visual ugliness is not completely out of place. But the film leans into it too often without enough control. The result is a movie that sometimes looks slick, sometimes looks smoky, sometimes looks expensive, and sometimes looks like someone forgot the audience needed to actually see the scene. And that is a problem because The Gray Man's is not a quiet chamber drama where darkness can carry emotional weight on its own. It is an action spectacle. Its biggest selling point is movement, impact, scale, and visual force. So when the cinematography dulls that force, the movie loses one of the main things it is supposed to have. For a film this big, this loud, and this expensive, it should not feel like the viewer has to fight through the image. But too often, that's exactly what happens. There's a point with The Gray Man where the visual darkness stops feeling like a style choice and starts feeling like a small obstacle course for your eyes. And that's not great. Because this is not some quiet, minimalist thriller where the camera is hiding information on purpose, letting the shadows do the storytelling. This is a huge action movie. It wants you to feel the scale, the movement, the damage, the physicality. It wants every punch, chase, gunshot, and explosion to land with impact. But sometimes the movie seems oddly determined to bury its own spectacle. You get fights where the lighting is low, interiors where faces are half lost in shadow, conversations that feel like they're happening inside rooms with all the bulbs removed, action scenes where smoke, darkness, fast cutting, and constant movement all pile on top of each other until the frame becomes harder to read than it should be. And look, darkness can work. In a story about secret agents, corrupt systems, hidden programs, and people who exist outside the official world, a darker visual palette makes sense. You don't want everything to look bright and clean. That would feel wrong. The world of The Gray Man should have some dirt on it. It should feel dangerous, hidden, a little morally rotten. But there's a difference between creating mood and making the audience squint. That's where the film loses balance. Too often, the image doesn't feel mysterious. It just feels underlit. And when you're watching a movie built around physical action, that becomes a real problem. If I can't clearly see who is moving where, who is hitting who, or how the scene is escalating, then I'm not inside the tension anymore. I'm outside it, trying to decode the picture. That's probably one of the most annoying things an action movie can do. It makes the viewer work for basic clarity. And the strange thing is, The Gray Man clearly has things worth showing. The locations are big, the sets are expensive, the action is ambitious, the cast looks good, the production has scale. This is not a movie that needed to hide its limitations in darkness. So when it does become visually muddy, it feels less like artistic grit and more like a technical choice that keeps getting in the way. It also makes the action feel less memorable. Because when a scene is clear, your brain holds on to it. You remember the geography, the movement, the image of the hero trapped in a specific place with danger closing in from a specific direction. But when everything is covered in smoke, shadow, and frantic motion, the scene can pass by without leaving a sharp impression. You remember that something big happened. You just don't always remember the shape of it. That's the frustrating part. The movie spends so much money trying to create massive action, and then some of that action gets swallowed by the way it's photographed and assembled. It's like buying an expensive painting and then hanging it in a room with the lights off. Maybe that sounds dramatic, but honestly, that's how parts of the movie feel. There are moments where you can sense the filmmakers reaching for a grittier, harder-edged spy thriller atmosphere. And I respect the intention. A movie like this should not look too clean. But intention only gets you so far if the final image keeps pulling attention to how difficult it is to read. A viewer should be thinking about danger, character, momentum, or excitement, not, wait, what just happened? And that question comes up a few too many times in The Gray Man. Another thing The Gray Man keeps doing is moving the camera like it's afraid stillness might hurt it. There are drone shots, swooping shots, spinning shots, shots that rush through space like the camera drank too much coffee before the scene started. And sometimes, sure, it gives the movie a bit of energy. You can tell the filmmakers want the action to feel modern, fast, aggressive, and expensive. But after a while, the camera movement starts calling attention to itself. That's where it gets distracting. The weird thing about The Gray Man's is that it is not hard to watch. That might sound like faint praise, and honestly, it kind of is. But it matters. The movie moves quickly. The cast is famous enough to keep your attention, and the action arrives so frequently that there is rarely a long stretch where you feel completely checked out. It is one of those films that can absolutely carry you through 2 hours if you are in the right mood. But once it is over, it starts disappearing almost immediately. And that is a bigger problem than it first seems, because a movie this expensive, with this much action and this many recognizable actors, should leave behind more than a general memory of stuff happened. You should remember a scene clearly. A line, a fight, a character moment, a visual, some specific feeling that stays with you after the credits. With The Gray Man, you remember the idea of the movie more than the movie itself. Ryan Gosling runs. Chris Evans acts crazy. A bunch of countries go by. Prague gets destroyed. People shoot at each other. Netflix spent a lot of money. That's the shape that remains. There are individual moments that stand out more than others, sure. The Prague sequence has scale. Lloyd Hansen has some amusing villain energy. Six has a few dry lines. The cast is easy to like. But even the better parts don't always stick as strongly as they should. They entertain you in the moment, then fade once the next piece of content comes along. That is the danger of making a movie that feels too assembled from familiar parts. While you are watching it, the formula works well enough. Your brain recognizes the rhythms. The betrayed assassin, the corrupt agency, the mysterious evidence, the global chase, the psycho villain, the child in danger. These things are familiar because they are effective. But familiarity can also make a movie harder to remember. If the film does not add a new flavor, a sharper character, a stronger emotional hook, or a truly unforgettable action scene, then it blends into every other movie that used the same ingredients. You don't hate it. You don't regret watching it. You just don't feel much need to return to it. And that is where The Gray Man Z lands in a strange place. It is too entertaining to dismiss completely, but too generic to become essential. You can imagine someone watching it on Netflix, having a decent time, maybe saying, "Yeah, that was fun," and then never thinking about it again. Not because the movie is awful, it isn't, but because it rarely gives you that one thing that makes an action film live in your memory. There is no single identity strong enough to hold on to. Bourne has paranoia and physical urgency. John Wick has style and mythology. Off Bond has elegance and tradition. Extraction has raw physical intensity. The Gray Man has pieces of all of those, but not enough of its own personality. That's why the rewatch value feels limited. The first watch gives you the surprise of scale, the novelty of Evans as a villain, the comfort of Gosling as a calm action lead, and the curiosity of seeing where all that Netflix money went. But on a second watch, once you already know the plot is thin and the action is uneven, what is really pulling you back? For some viewers, the answer will simply be action. And fair enough. If you like this kind of non-stop spectacle, there is enough here to revisit casually. It can work as background entertainment, a weekend action pick, or something to throw on when you don't want to think too deeply. But as a movie you feel excited to experience again, that is harder to argue. Because The Gray Man Z is built for immediate consumption more than lasting impact. It gives you quick pleasure, fast movement, and familiar thrills. Then it slips away, leaving behind the feeling that you watched a very expensive film that somehow still felt disposable. And maybe that is the most frustrating part. The movie is not forgettable because nothing happens. It is forgettable because so much happens without enough meaning attached to it. The Gray Man feels like the kind of movie many people will watch once and be mostly okay with that. And that is not necessarily an insult. Some movies are built to be revisited. You go back because the characters stay with you, the world feels rich, the action has layers, or the story hits differently the second time. Other movies are more like a fast meal. You enjoy them while they're in front of you, maybe even more than expected, but you don't feel a strong need to order the exact same thing again. This is closer to the second category. It is a once-through action ride. You press play, get the stars, get the explosions, get Chris Evans acting like a designer-brand psychopath, get Ryan Gosling calmly surviving the impossible, and then you move on. It gives you enough entertainment to justify the time, especially if you already like this kind of spy assassin chaos. But it does not leave you with much unfinished emotional business. You're not haunted by Six. You're not desperate to unpack the politics of the agency. You're not replaying the dialogue in your head. You're not sitting there thinking, I need to experience that again immediately. It is more like, yeah, that was fine, pretty fun, anyway. And for a film with this budget and this cast, that reaction feels a little smaller than it should. The movie has so much going for it on the surface. It has the scale of something that wants to be rewatchable. It has the franchise setup. It has the actors. It has set pieces that clearly want to become signature moments. But because the story is so familiar and the characters are not deeply textured, the film works better as first-time spectacle than long-term favorite. The first watch has curiosity on its side. You want to see how Gosling handles the role. You want to see Evans go full villain. You want to see where the money went. You want to know if Netflix actually pulled off a major action franchise starter. That curiosity carries a lot of the experience. But once those questions are answered, the movie loses some of its pull. A second watch would need stronger substance to stand on, stronger character dynamics, sharper suspense, cleaner action, more memorable humor, a world that feels exciting beyond just the possibility of more missions. Instead, the gray menu is mostly powered by momentum. And momentum is powerful while it's happening, but it doesn't always survive after the movie ends. That's why I can recommend it more easily as a casual watch than as something essential. If someone says they want a big, loud, easy action movie for the night, sure, this fits. It has enough charm, enough chaos, and enough recognizable faces to do the job. But if someone asks whether it's the kind of action movie they'll want to revisit again and again, that's harder to say. For me, it feels more disposable than durable. Not disposable in the sense that it has no value. It absolutely has value as popcorn entertainment. But disposable in the sense that it seems designed for the moment. Watch it, enjoy the noise, maybe talk about one scene, then let the algorithm serve you the next thing. And that might be the most honest way to describe its place. The Gray Man is not painful. It is not boring. It is not worthless. It is just not sticky. It gives you a night of action, and sometimes that is enough. But the best action movies give you a reason to come back. They leave behind images, lines, fights, emotions, or characters that keep calling you back after the first viewing. The Gray Man mostly leaves behind the memory of having watched a very expensive movie do exactly what you expected it to do. No more, no less. So, where does all of this leave The Gray Man? Honestly, somewhere right in the middle. And that might be the most annoying answer, but it's also the most accurate one. This is not a disaster. It is not some unwatchable action mess where nothing works and everyone involved looks embarrassed to be there. There is too much talent on screen for that, and too many individual moments that do exactly what they're supposed to do. But it's also not the knockout it clearly wanted to be. That's the strange thing about it. The Gray Man has almost everything a modern action blockbuster is supposed to have. Big stars, big directors, big locations, big budget, a simple hook, a sequel-friendly lead, a villain people can talk about, constant action, enough humor to keep the mood light, enough violence to make the stakes seem serious. On paper, it sounds like a guaranteed win. In practice, it is more complicated. If you watch it purely as popcorn entertainment, there is a decent chance you'll have fun. The movie moves quickly. Ryan Gosling is easy to follow. Chris Evans gives the film some wild villain energy. The Prague sequence is big enough to wake everything up. Ana de Armas, Billy Bob Thornton, Dhanush, and the rest of the cast keep adding little boosts whenever the story starts feeling too mechanical. There is entertainment here, no question. But if you expect the movie to be more than that, sharper, smarter, more stylish, more emotionally involving, that's where the disappointment creeps in. Because the story is familiar, the characters are thin, the action is uneven, the tone keeps shifting, the visuals can be muddy, the dialogue has its moments, but not enough of them. And the whole thing sometimes feels like a franchise pitch dressed up as a finished movie. That is why the reactions make sense on both sides. People who liked it are not wrong. If you came for 2 hours of loud, easy, star-driven action, The Gray Man gives you plenty of that. It is the kind of movie where you can switch off part of your brain and enjoy the chaos. Sometimes that is all you want from this genre. But people who are disappointed are not wrong either. Because with this cast, this budget, and the Russo brothers behind it, pretty fun, feels like a low ceiling. The movie had the resources to be special. It had the actors to be memorable. It had the source material and franchise potential to become something with real identity. Instead, it often settles for being broadly entertaining. And broadly entertaining is fine, it's just not exciting. That's probably the fairest way to describe The Gray Man. It is a watchable movie that keeps bumping into the shadow of the better movie it could have been. Every time it starts to become sharper, it rushes into another explosion. Every time a character could become more interesting, the plot moves on. Every time the action starts working, the editing or CGI or visual clutter gets in the way. Still, I can't say I was bored. And that counts for something. There are plenty of action films that are generic and dull. The Gray Man's is generic, yes, but it's rarely dull for long. It has enough energy to survive its weaknesses, even if it doesn't have enough personality to overcome them completely. So the mixed reception feels right. It is too entertaining to completely dismiss, too underwritten to fully praise, too expensive to ignore, too familiar to admire without reservation. It sits in that strange streaming blockbuster zone where you finish it thinking, yeah, that was okay, while also knowing it probably should have been much better. And maybe that is the real disappointment. Not that The Gray Man is bad, but that it had every reason to be great and somehow ended up being just fine. So would I recommend The Gray Man? The Gray Man, yes, but with a few warnings attached. If you're looking for a smart, layered spy thriller with real paranoia, emotional depth, and a plot that keeps tightening around the characters, this probably isn't going to satisfy you. The movie is too familiar for that. Too loud, too eager to jump into the next action sequence before anything deeper can really settle. But if what you want is a big, easy, expensive-looking action ride with recognizable stars and a lot of chaos, then yeah, The Gray Man does the job. It is absolutely a turn-your-brain-down kind of movie. Not off completely, because then some of the plot details might float past you, but definitely down. This is not the kind of film you watch because you want realism. You watch it because you want Ryan Gosling moving through impossible danger with the emotional temperature of a man waiting in line for coffee. You watch it because Chris Evans is clearly enjoying every second of being awful. You watch it because sometimes a movie throwing planes, bullets, mercenaries, corrupt CIA people, and European destruction at the screen is enough for a night, and for a lot of viewers, it will be enough. That's the thing. The Gray Man's is not great, but it is easy to enjoy. It has pace. It has personality in flashes. It has some strong action moments. It has actors who know how to keep thin material alive. It never becomes as sharp or memorable as it should, but it also rarely becomes lifeless. It's one of those movies where your reaction probably depends heavily on what you bring into it. If you expect The Next Born, you'll probably be disappointed. If you expect Netflix trying to build its own action franchise with a huge budget and familiar ingredients, you'll get exactly that. And maybe that's the fairest final verdict. The Gray Man's is a polished, overstuffed, uneven popcorn thriller that works better as casual entertainment than as a serious action classic. It has the cast of a much better movie, the budget of a much bigger movie, and the story of a movie we've all seen before. But it still has enough momentum to keep you watching. Would I call it essential? No. Would I call it a waste of time? Not really. It sits right in that middle space, fun while it lasts, messy when you think about it, and probably more impressive as a Netflix strategy than as a complete film. If you like non-stop action, sarcastic heroes, exaggerated villains, and spy thrillers that don't ask too much from you, it's worth a watch. Just don't go in expecting the gray areas to be very deep. This is not a complex intelligence thriller hiding inside an action movie. It's an action movie wearing a spy thriller jacket. And honestly, for one night, that might be enough.